We triumph and self-abasement. Everything else we shall destroy. The past is forbidden. Why? Because when we can cut man from his own past, then we can cut him from his family, his children. There is no loyalty except loyalty to the party. There is no love except love of Big Brother. All competing pleasures we will destroy. If you want a vision of the future, Winston, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. Winston, you are thinking that my face is old and tired. That while I talk of power, I am unable to prevent the decay of my own body. But the individual is only a cell, Winston. And the weariness of the cell is the vigor of the organism.
You'll fail.
Why?
It's impossible. Hatred and fear have no life.
Why is hate less vital than love?
I don't know. But somehow you'll fail. Something will defeat you. Life will defeat you.
We control life at all levels. We create human nature. Men are infinitely malleable. Or perhaps you return to your old idea that the proletarians will arise. Put it out of your mind. They're helpless animals. Humanity is the party.
I don't care. In the end, they'll beat you. Sooner or later, they'll tear you to pieces.
On what evidence?
Goldstein's book.
I wrote it. Or at least I collaborated in writing it. No book is individually produced, as you know.
I just believe it. I know you'll fail. There's something in this world, some spirit that you will never overcome.
What is it, this principle?
I don't know. The spirit of man.
And do you consider yourself a man?
Yes.
If you're a man, you're the last man. Your kind is extinct. We are the inheritors. Do you understand that you're alone? You're outside history. You unexist.
You unexist.
You unexist. You're an unperson.
You're the last man.
How did you feel about like when people were just being eliminated out of history, when he was sitting there in his little cubicle, like setting fire to their pictures and just rewriting history as they went?
Oh, look, the whole shooting match was
with
just...
With the whole Fox Studios logo sitting over the top of it.
It was incredibly depressing.
Well, yes, it was a bit, wasn't it? It was, yeah.
So that was scene from 1984, which came out in 1984.
It came out in 1984, yes.
Funny that.
Yes. No, the two people were Richard Burton, who died a couple of months after that scene was filmed.
Did he really?
He was so arthritic. He'd lived a very hard life. He was so arthritic that they actually had to get somebody else to hold his arm up to do the four fingers.
Oh, wow. Is that why they do this certain... I noticed they cut in a certain way.
He couldn't sit... He could barely sit down.
Poor mate. Okay.
So, yeah, he was in all sorts of bad ways sort of thing. So when he looked old and haggard and when he was saying, I might look old and, all the rest of it...
He meant it.
He really meant it because he was essentially dying.
Okay.
So,
should I give a storyline before you start going right into this? That's not
you better.
So it's Britain, 1984. Britain has been they've been involved in war and it's still ongoing. And what have I written here? Why have I scribbled that out? That's weird. Don't worry. Sorry. I should have had the other drink. Boom. So Britain, they're in war, it's still ongoing, and they're now joined in a super state called Oceania.
Oceania.
Yes.
Yeah, which is essentially Western Europe, England and America.
Yes. The film follows Winston Smith, a low-ranking civil servant who's struggling to enjoy life and his individuality as the regime's overwhelming power and influence tries to remove these on both a political and personal level. How's that?
Sounds good.
Gosh, I had more stuff written here, but I scribbled it out and now I don't know why.
Now, can I ask
That
you...
was really... I don't know why I
So
did
that's
that,
your
sorry.
first introduction to George Orwell. Now,
No, I've read Animal Farm.
You have read Animal Farm.
I have.
And
I haven't read 1984. I didn't read the book before watching the film.
Yep.
Which, after speaking to a friend who's read the book, she said, oh, you don't want to read it anyway. But then I found watching the film, I actually went back and read like a short version of the book,
Yep.
you know, like just a abbreviated version.
Yep.
I found that actually helped a couple of things because there were a couple of things that flagged for me, but that's purely from a movie storyline following
Sure.
thing that I like.
Yep. Okay.
But no, I've read Animal Farm, but I hadn't read 1984.
Can I ask can I ask first of all, what did you think it was actually about? What do you think he was trying to say to us? Can I give you some historical perspective then?
You go for your life because all I could think was, wow, because he didn't think we're leaning towards this. He said, but the possibility's there, and
Yes. Well, he was. What happened was when he wrote this, it was directly after the Second
World War, yes.
And England was just like in the movie. It was just rubble. All the cities had been reduced to
All of those.
rubble.
Oceania was
Oceania.
recovering from World War II, and they weren't doing a very good job recovering at that point.
No, that's right.
It was still squabble and
Yes.
rubbish.
And he was looking around. Now, he was looking what was happening over in the Soviet Union. And do you need a refill?
No, I was just going to say how tragic.
I know.
My glass is empty.
Well, you've come to the right place tonight, obviously. So he looked at what was Joseph Stalin was doing, and he looked at the fascists that had done in the Second World War sort of thing, and he was starting to get some political ideas, and he started to hammer them together, and he produced an approximation of what he thought if they continued going, if all the countries were continuing to go in those. Because what he was doing was he was watching the Soviet Union just starting to swallow up places like Czechoslovakia and all of Eastern Europe sort of thing, and and just like essentially annexing them. And he thought, well, maybe...
He went the next step, and he didn't think anyone else would follow his book through to the next step.
What do you mean?
As in... He's taking it to the extreme.
Yes, well, that's what I mean. He wanted to say, well, how long would it take to get to
that point?
And you have a look at the technology that's in the movie. It's pretty rough stuff. About the only thing that was new technology in that entire thing were two things: the helicopter and the TV screen.
Yes.
The
big flat screen with the two-way camera.
With two-way camera, yep.
Big Brother watching.
Yep. How did you find that was intrusive?
What was interesting?
Considering how we are today and how much of our own, because we have bugger all private space nowadays. Like we are, in many senses of the word, constantly tracked. Our phones track our positions.
Well, what's funny is that, Australians are now going through the stage of all their medical records are up. There was a big hullabaloo about that. And a lot of Aussies just went, I've got nothing to hide.
That's exactly right. And that's how it's done.
And I'm just thinking, I was thinking about, because this is up recently and I'm watching this film and going, well, hang on, if you do that, then the next thing is this and then this. And then they've got all your information. And people say, yes, I've got nothing to hide. It doesn't matter. I even said the same thing. I'm thinking, I don't have anything to hide on my medical record.
You saw what happened.
But then I thought, well, hang on, then they've got everything. All your privacy is gone. And then that's the start. The fact that they know your fears, they know your history, they know your weaknesses, and it just does your head in.
The only thing that saves us, and this is the thing, what he is showing is a totalitarian state, but more importantly, a fully organised totalitarian state that is a closed circuit. In other words, it's perfect in its inception. That makes no mistakes. There is no room, like in that conversation there's no possibility of there being a revolution or a revolt because they have plugged all the holes.
You need men or women, I should say as well.
And of course they
men,
disappear.
women, individuals. You've got none of that.
That all disappears.
It's just a machine.
And how do you know that these people are rising? Because they need a certain, like for example, in the 60s, for example, when black activists started to really get going, oh God, I'm going to get shot for this for forgetting his name. Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't just step out of nowhere and start leading the whole movement. Do you know what I mean? It's like the authorities knew about him for a very long time, and it was not just him, and there was like Malcolm X, and there was quite a few others that the authorities had been tracking for a very long time. And this is what happens. The only thing that saves us is that at this point in time, they're not organised. Like people say Trump's a fascist, for example. Some people, and I know we talk to a lot of people in America sort of thing, and there's a whole section of people who don't think that he's a fascist, and and they're entitled to their opinion sort of thing. Although this week, kind of watching what's been happening with the Saudis and that poor man being killed, that's problematic in that when you're giving the tick for journalists to disappear and be killed, that is exactly what 1984 is about. We didn't pick this movie because we knew that was happening or anything like that. Our movies are kind of locked in for about 3 or 4 weeks beforehand.
Which is my fault, yeah.
Yeah, but that's because you're very organised. It was a bit of a shock to the system about how many things fell into place this week, which is what freaked me out because I didn't think, because we're looking at Facebook Friends movies, and Shawshank Redemption came up, and I didn't even think that the two would have an effect on one another. Yes. And then certain topics that have been happening in the news occurred, and I went, oh, okay. Yep. And then I was listening to that podcast torturing the torture psychologist, and I went, oh, that's it. My week's just going to be depressive. Yeah. Well, this is it. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was a couple of weeks. My time is blurring a little bit at the moment, I have to admit. I think it was last week that he went for an interview with somebody, some American journalist who hadn't yet been shot and killed.
Oh, yes.
And that's the whole point of what he's trying to drive and get people to start, going fake news and all the rest of it. As soon as they lock into that, well, he's got half the battle won right there, because he can just essentially say whatever he likes and nobody has any channels of discrediting him.
People they can only hear what is available to them.
That's exactly right. And if they're not even listening to that, then...
If it's all just what they want people to hear, then that's it, isn't it? It's like that scene where William Smith is reading a thing and it says chocolate has been dropped to 30 grams or whatever per person. Yep. And he rewrites it to say government increases chocolate from 20 to 25.
Well, this is why I was kind of...
And I went, oh my gosh. And people are like, oh, isn't this fabulous? It's wonderful.
You're seeing it happening right now in front of us sort of thing. It's that just spin, and then they just... But because it's a completely closed unit, they have the ability to completely... There's no fact checker.
No, that's it.
And because he's a smart man and he can remember things and certain little details are locked in.
Our protagonist.
Yes.
Winston Smith, sorry.
He can actually remember. And this is it. When you have somebody like, for example, Trump coming in, and he's not the only one. I'm not just necessarily picking on him, but he's just such an excellent example of how it works. A lot lately. Yes, and let's face it, everybody's talking about him, but he's an excellent example. He just throws up detail after detail after detail, one outrage after another outrage after another. Any one of these things that have happened over the last 3 weeks would end any